David Clayton Warner was born on January 30th, 1971 to a 16-year-old mother, Barbara Warner Soares, who at the time struggled to make ends meet. She was unemployed and wasn't sure how she could support her son, so her mother, David's grandmother, Faye Warner, legally adopted him and raised him at her home in Beeler Avenue in Jefferson City, Tennessee. Despite these circumstances, David maintained a very close relationship with his mother. David had a lot of support from his aunts and uncles also growing up, and was known to them as Little David, as his uncle was Big David. At 12 years old, 4th grader David was described as a friendly, good and bright boy who often helped others, even those he didn't know. He'd help neighbours by buying them items from the store or carry their groceries for them. Despite giving most of the people he met the benefit of the doubt, David was street smart and knew of the dangers of interacting with strangers. He'd often be seen walking around town or hanging out at the local arcade with his friends, with locals calling him mischievous but not a troublemaker. At school, despite showing promise in some subjects, he struggled academically overall and had to repeat a year, but his family believed he just wasn't suited to a classroom environment. On March 2nd, 1983, David attended Jefferson City Elementary School as usual. However, that day, report cards were handed out to the children, and David was elated to discover that he had achieved an A grade in physical education. He was due to attend a function at the church, not far from his Beeler Avenue home, but although he stopped by the church, he did not enter and continued on his way down the street towards a Druthers restaurant. The restaurant had a policy in which, if a child showed them their report card and they had good grades, they could redeem a free meal. David presented his report card and he collected his free meal, a hamburger and a soft drink. The events following David's visit to Druthers remains unclear, as sources conflict on where he went afterwards. Several sources state that the 12-year-old visited a friend's house where they watched television and he left for home at approximately 7 p.m. However, he never returned. Other sources claim David was last seen by Odell and Sycamore Lane, though according to his family, they last saw him at the end of Beeler Avenue close to Broadway Boulevard. After he left Druthers, David vanished into thin air, never to be seen or heard from again. David's family didn't realise he was missing until the following morning, this mainly being due to the fact that his bed sheets had been arranged to look like David was asleep under the covers, but of course he was not. Initially, the Warners believed that David may have spent the night over at his friend's house, as it was something he had done before. However, after checking in with them, they realised that this had not been the case. His grandmother immediately reported David as missing to the authorities, and a huge search for him was launched, involving air and ground searches. Police, firefighters, search and rescue teams, and volunteers scoured the area for any sign of David, but unfortunately to no avail. Despite his family being insistent that something was awry, police initially believed Warner to be a runaway. There were rumours circulating that David was living in another state, specifically Florida, with a cousin of his biological father, a man named Ivan Red Wilson, but this was later quashed. A detective went to Red's Miami residence and spotted 2 young boys, one of which who resembled David, but it was not him. Police found Red Wilson was no longer resident at the property, but he too claimed to know nothing of David's whereabouts. Police were satisfied that Red was not involved in his disappearance. One theory was suggested by David's aunt, that Edgar, David's father, was somehow involved. She claimed that Edgar loved to be the centre of attention and didn't exactly go out of his way to help looking for his missing son. Despite her suspicions of him, Edgar was ruled out as a suspect and has since passed away. His father was questioned extensively by investigators at the time, but he told them he knew nothing of his son's whereabouts or what had happened to him. It should be noted, however, that his father, Edgar Wilson, had received a strange printed letter which he handed over to the authorities. The letter read, quote, "Edgar, if your son is at your cousin's in Miami, you better do something now. Someone has told them that you do. An unknown friend." Because of David's likeliness to help people, even strangers, his family became concerned that he had been lured away by someone, possibly in a car. Police investigators believe that, unfortunately, David most likely fell victim to this situation. He was abducted and possibly murdered, but there is no evidence, physical or otherwise, to suggest that he met this particular fate. His uncle told the media, quote, "There are a lot of cruel people in this world, but David thought everybody was his friend. I think he could be talked into going with someone if they tricked him with, 'Help me find my puppy,' or something like that." Unfortunately, this case quickly went cold. No suspects were ever established, and lack of any leads or clues has left this case at a standstill. All that is left to go on are the many possible theories as to what happened to David. The initial rumours suggested he may have witnessed a crime whilst walking alone along the Jefferson City streets, and as a result was disposed of to keep the witness silent. However, this theory quickly fizzled out and is deemed the least likely. Abduction seems like the most likely occurrence in this case. Unfortunately, David's family have been left with no closure as to what happened to him. Whether he is alive or deceased remains unknown, but despite the years that have passed, his remaining family hold on to the hope that someday they'll find the answers. This case remains open and will continue to be so until David is found. Detectives urge anyone with any information, no matter how big or small, to come forward. When he disappeared in 1983, David Warner was 12 years old. He is described as being Caucasian with blonde hair and brown eyes, standing between 5'2" and 5'5" tall, and weighing 110 pounds. On the day he was last seen, David was wearing a black and white Pittsburgh Steelers sweatshirt, a pair of blue jeans, and a pair of sneakers. It should be noted that David suffers from epilepsy and has done since he was born. Due to the circumstances involved, David is classed as endangered missing. If alive today in 2024, he would be 53 years old. Anyone with any information regarding the disappearance of David Warner are urged to contact Jefferson City Police Department on 615-475-2002.